podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Factory of the Future. I'm here today with A.W. Schultz. I'm Alexandria Burek, and we are going to be talking all about internal digital culture. In this episode, we're going to cover stories from our past lives of implementing new technology, how people and how we were able to break down and move past barriers and make the technology so much less intimidating than it was initially felt. Today's episode is all about taking the human-centric approach when implementing technology to make sure it's a win for everyone. So AW, why don't you kick it off today on the topics and get the story started?
Okay, well, thanks, Alexandria. Uh, this is, I imagine this gets a little passionate because this has been real problems that Alexandria and I have had to face through our careers. And if you think about it, adding technology to the workforce is hard. You're essentially changing a culture that removes the paper and brings in the iPad. And for me, I can start, Alexandria, is a couple examples I've led over the years, because I always get the story is that, our data isn't right. Our data isn't right. Well, here's the thing. If you're getting 80% of it right, you can make decisions on that. And whether it's a CMS system, whether it's a efficiency tracking system, it's all about just what you put in is what you get out. Garbage in, garbage out. That's what you can expect. And for our examples, we're talking about, unfortunately, I work with a lot of people that speak or English as a second language, and the examples I'm thinking about is Spanish, and the couple my first experiences with it was working with individuals that they didn't understand it, and we both shared examples that we had people that left their positions because we were invoking, technology or, the age of Industry 4.0 into it. And we had to bring about some individuals. And by the way, these are outstanding employees, outstanding. And the examples we were talking about is how they dealt with it and how I dealt with it.
Yeah.
Because there's a level of patience.
I was gonna say it was crazy. Like what I love your example, and I can't wait for you to share your story with the audience about the way that you guys overcame the language barrier and how like the attitude was everything. So I'm not gonna spoil it for everyone, but that truly is what I think about implementing technology. Your end users, if their attitude is terrible, you're not going to be successful. And in fact, coming from a trucking background, several years ago, the industry required electronic logging devices. And it was a mass exodus for these truck drivers where they literally, many, many, many truck drivers in the thousands, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands even, left the industry because they did not want to use technology. They did not want to convert from paper logs to electronic logging devices on a tablet. So, I mean, AW, why don't you go ahead and share your story from that new technology implementation that you guys were doing and the amazing story of the happy ending, really.
Yeah, I mean, it was a happy ending because I was working in a union facility, and the individual that I'm going to be talking about, I mean, we worked well together, but she could speak very little English, and I speak even less Spanish. But we had a great relationship because we understood what we wanted to do, and she was very proud of her position. She was a machine operator on a labeling of bottles, is what her role was. And we put all roll out a new system, a lot of technology. I mean, quite a bit. This is a very automated factory, and while she didn't wasn't able to understand the English aspect, we were able to break those barriers just on the in the facial recognition, and she knew I was going to help her. She worked with other operators that were close by, but the thing is that, like you mentioned, it was she had the attitude. She was
Yeah.
proud of her work. She cared what she did, and she wanted to get it right.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest takeaway for me is that if you can create that, that is so powerful. And I can't emphasize that enough. And many other examples where we've seen people leave
Yeah.
because they didn't have the right attitude, or they thought that they'd be persecuted because they couldn't do it.
So I think that also taught when we're thinking about internal digital culture, I think that's a great mention right there, AW, is what is the attitude of management, right? So it's not only the attitude of the end user, are they interested and ready to learn and adopt this new technology that's being rolled out, but also what's the attitude of managers? I had a conversation yesterday where we're really working on getting a totally new behavior change across multiple end user roles at our organization, which will lend itself to a much more efficient maintenance process. It'll lend itself to more maintenance being done, and it'll connect a lot of dots. But it's really been an uphill battle to get the managers of some of these end users to coach their teams up on using this. It's been a never-ending battle to get the mechanics to then check the tablet. It's like it's all these different facets, but and me and one of the other managers, we're basically tackling this from two different ends, but together, right? We're both committed to getting this done. He's responsible for the mechanics. I'm responsible for the other group, basically. And he's like, "Well, do you want me to like write him up for not doing that?" I was like, "No, let's start fresh. Let's start fresh today and encourage them to use it. Let's not use the technology as an authoritarian disciplinary tool at this time. We want this to be something that they're not intimidated by, but something that they're willing to do and to use." And and he was like, "You're right. I like that idea a lot." And it made just a lot of sense to me because I thought if I was in their shoes, my boss is now forcing me to do extra work. My boss is now, adding this new step and this new thing that I have to worry about and on top of all the other things that I'm already doing. And then also, if I don't do it right, I'm going to get yelled at. Like, nobody wants that. That's not good for the end user. It's not good for the program in and of itself. So I think a lot of managers need to keep that in mind as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially rolling a new program.
Right.
I mean, if you're starting with that, and if anybody doesn't follow, they're going to be disciplined.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for failure. And you need to show that you're just as invested on them getting be
Yeah.
successful than anything else. I mean, it's no different than having kids and they knowing that, we're in it together. We're gonna fix it.
Yeah.
And having that positive attitude. I mean, it paves the way
Yeah.
where, I mean, multiple times I come in and they just say the new technology they applied doesn't work. And we've told them multiple times. And when you start saying it that way, it just means that you're being more of a dictator than you are being a leader than a resource on that.
Right. And I think that that's something that a lot of managers and organizations in general miss. It takes a lot to bring people's attitude from we can't do this to how can we do this? Just by asking that question or saying it differently, or this doesn't work, or we haven't found the right, we have to tweak it a little bit. We haven't found the right solution yet. And I keep explaining, I explained that to all the different users yesterday. I was like, okay, guys, we need to start here. And if that doesn't work, then we go to here. And if we get that going, then and it falls short on the next, I said, we're just got to start somewhere and we've got to make incremental progress. And everybody seemed to rally around that idea. And I think the other part that people, the human centric piece, AW, is really, and I think maybe some leaders or even myself might be guilty of this, but like when you're training people on technology, you're also doing a real life action, right? We can't forget about the real life actions. So, okay, we're doing all these technology steps, but now pause. We have to do some real life stuff. We can't just be clicking on the computer, but never we knowing when to bridge that and move from the technology to the real life and back is also an art. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for leaders to encourage their teams to think about that and make sure that's a part of the training too. So it's not just about the technology, but what is the technology prompting us to do, and what's the reason for it?
So you just defined what the reason why we're entering into Industry 5.0
Yeah,
and what the problem is with Industry 4.0. It's you have to involve the people with the process
yeah,
and being sold on, state of the art technology that can solve all your problems is great, but it's still being operated by people. It doesn't matter how much robotics you have, somebody has to take care of the robots.
yeah, yeah. And I think, where I see a lot of organizations, leaders falling short as well is it's a living, breathing thing that also needs to be maintained. A lot of leaders just think, oh, we'll implement this technology, we'll invest in that, and then it's done. But in order for technology to be successful, it needs to be constantly managed and constantly improved. You said garbage in, garbage out. Okay, well, if you're not managing the data set in the system, it will eventually erode the information coming out of it.
Yeah.
If the end users don't feel like there's any like I think one of the reasons that my program is so successful is because I'm constantly making improvements based on the end user's feedback. The end user can say, "Oh, hey, you know what would be really cool or what I'd really like is this," and then I go and get that done. And it creates this living, breathing feedback loop where their voices feel heard. It's technology that they have a hand in developing, and it just creates this really amazing kind of set of momentum and engagement. And then it gets them thinking, how can the system be better? But also because we're actually putting these things into action and into life, it makes it so they want to use it.
Yeah, it's that Richard Deming's plan, do,
Yeah,
check, act. I mean,
yeah,
you're creating a continuous improvement cycle,
yeah, that's it.
and
That's it.
everything that I coach and consult on is the same thing. Is like, okay, we're not done. We're just always trying to improve it because
Yeah.
there's always areas to fix, areas to
There's
fix.
there's always areas to fix. And as the business or the real life changes, the technology needs to change to adapt to that. So it's a constant, it's almost like a closed loop manufacturing cycle. The real life changes create changes in the technology. Changes in the technology create real life changes in the actual world and how we do business. And I think if leaders can wrap their mind around that, or if leaders can really step forward with that kind of an approach, I think they're going to have a more successful organization in terms of that continuous improvement mindset, in terms of their technology implementation. Technology is not going anywhere. We're going to need to use more of it and make sure we're using it together in the most efficient way.
So, real life examples, can you share with me? How did you know that your rollout of the new technology going from paper to digital was working when you in the logging of the trucks?
Okay, so on one hand, it was required by the Department of Transportation. So it
Yeah,
wasn't a negotiable thing.
right.
It was an industry-wide change, legislatively backed and implemented or forced. Now, with that, we were able to select different electronic log, select the system. So one of the things I did with my team was try them out. And I used the drivers, the end users. I asked for volunteers. So it wasn't me picking them. It was who wants to be engaged in this, right? And then that props that person up as kind of the leader of their group, their end user group, right? And then the the drivers were, I said, okay, now try to think about where are the issues? What do you like about the system and what don't you like about the system? Again, I think really what it boils down to is the leader's attitude towards the end user, making it wanting to my attitude wanting to make sure that it was a good selection for not only them but also for me, and then engaging them in the beginning of the process is what led itself to being, I think, more successful than maybe some others, right? Because there's all many different approaches I could have taken. I could have just said, this is the cheapest technology, or I like this one for this reason. We're just going to go with that. And that wouldn't have landed as well. Even with the legislative backing, they still have to learn and be successful with using the system because if they're not, then we're still not compliant. And I fell short in my job. Yeah, I guess that would be one of I think one of the reasons that it went well is it was legislatively backed, but my attitude and the level of engagement
Your
is
attitude.
what made the difference there. You were telling me a story about a workshop you were doing when you were in Africa and about the language barrier. How did you overcome that? And tell us about kind of what your experience was and what led you to pick up on that and then how you guys solve that problem.
Yeah, what I was mentioning earlier was before the show was my last trip to Africa, and I was doing a training on maintenance planning and scheduling, and it was about 3 days into it, and I started to realize we were having a communication barrier because they could speak English, but it's I can't
There's
speak
a
because I only
delay.
speak one language.
Yeah.
They speak Portuguese, and they translate it when I'm speaking. And we started thumbing through like because we had lunch together. Like, what can we do? Because I want you to grab this stuff. I want you to grab this knowledge as I'm going through it. And I originally said, well, you know what? PowerPoint will translate my presentation to Portuguese if you want. And they go, no, I don't want that. How about when we talk, because I encourage an open communication throughout it, that PowerPoint translates what they're saying back and forth from Portuguese to English, and then I could contribute because they spoke English, just it was just their native language, back and forth, and that's one of the ways we broke that barrier.
Yeah.
And my original story I was talking about with this other lady was Spanish, and we would draw pictures or we point and stuff. It's just like if you got the will, there's a way of solving it.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that we always, kind of check for process that are working is like you got to communicate, you got to review it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
roll something out, you're sharing with them how we're doing and what we need to fix on it. We're not doing a discipline thing. We're just saying what we need to fix on it because you make them feel that they're part of it. You've got some invested interest in it. It becomes much easier. It becomes much easier.
So I feel like we're at a good place here to say, in summary, number one, the attitude of everyone can either make or break a technology, right?
Yes.
Attitude of everyone. It can't be if the leadership is doing all the right things, but the people who are the end users have a terrible attitude, it's not going to work. And vice versa. Even if the end users were really positive and ready to engage and train and all those things, but if the leadership isn't engaging and trying to help make the system work to its best capacity, it'll eventually die out and that system's still not going to succeed. So attitude is really everything. Those people wanted to engage, so therefore you guys were able to come up with a solution. I think that's so key. Like the other employee, she wanted to learn how to use the system, and despite the language barrier, you were successful at doing so. I think that's amazing. And I came up with this slogan recently, and I think this fits perfectly. So accountability plus encouragement, uh, or accountability plus empowerment equals improvement or
Improvement. Yeah.
right? Like, okay, so we want to make people accountable, but we also want to be encouraging about it. We don't want to be disciplinary or make them feel bad. But um, I don't know. Are you feeling like we're in a good spot? Are we clocking out?
Yeah, I think that's the the nail on it. And well, thank you everyone for attending, and we're checking out here like finished goods.
Checking
All
out.
right.
Yeah.
This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.